Today, we're going to talk about 3 things that you should be doing to get retainer clients as a photographer and a videographer.
Here to show up and show out. 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 Yeah.
So I'll be honest, I'm in studio right now. I'm shooting with one of my clients as we speak. We're on a quick break. And I said, let's talk about it, because I think oftentimes people look at retainer work as this big, massive idea, this big project of how do I make it happen? And the reality is there's scales to this. So I personally have about 4 retainer clients, and each of them pay a different dollar amount. And it's based on what they need versus what they can afford. Because the reality is, I don't care so much about what people can afford as much as I care about what is your need and how can I get to where you need to be. First and foremost is when you think of a retainer client, and I took a couple of notes here, is you got to understand that you got to think more like a business partner versus just being a shooter. Oftentimes people come into retainer thinking, oh, I'm just going to shoot, I'm going to edit, and that's it. But the reality is how you become even more in-depth and engaged with your retainer business is you become immersed in their business, meaning you learn, you understand, you know what they need to be successful. You identify the things that's going to win. You look at the trends of what's taking place in their market, and then you say, how can I be a part of that, and how can I add value? If you looked at the last video, you know that I told you when you're thinking about your price, you have to always think not just about the time that you're shooting, but you're also thinking about the value that you're adding. And so one of the biggest things that I look at when I go in, definitely as a photographer or videographer for a client that is wanting to bring me on as a retainer, is understanding, one, can I add value to their business? Can I add value to their space as I'm shooting? If I know nothing about it, have I taken the time to learn more about what they do? If not, have I also at least made or identified what they're doing in that space and in that industry? And also sometimes being able to tell them, hey, you know what, this may not be a good fit, but referring them out, or saying being a constant shooter may not be what you need as much as it may be, let's set up a brand package for you. Now, the other thing that I would say, number 2, would be building a systemized monthly offering plan. You know, oftentimes people go into this thinking, oh, I'm going to go in and I'm going to go 12 months in. Well, some people may not be able to go 12 months. They may not see 12 months down the line. They may see 3 months. They may see 6 months. So I have 3 types of contracts. I have a 3-month plan, I have a 6-month plan, and I have a 12-month plan. In those, we evaluate every step of the way to determine, is it necessary for us to keep moving forward, or do we pull back, or do we readjust? Whether that's me taking on the editing, whether that's me just shooting for them. Now, I will tell you also, when it comes to having a systemized monthly plan offering, it's also recognizing how are you going to be able to manage that client? Because now you're managing that client as a business partner and not just as a shooter. And so you recognize, one, do you have enough availability in your schedule, the flexibility to be able to pop up and shoot with them maybe once a month, twice a month? Understanding what those offerings are is super important, because as you're doing that, that client is also being able to look at their schedule to say, this is what I can do and what I can't do. Working with that client is so important in understanding what their business needs, because some clients, for example, if you're working with a wedding planner, you really can't work with them on the weekends. Why? Because they're working on the weekends. So you got to have that availability during the weekdays. Also, you may be looking at someone such as as a contractor that builds houses or does repairs. Well, reality is you may need to be in the field doing their content versus being in studio. So you have to understand what, when, where, and how you're going to be working with them on a regular basis to be able to determine that. That's so important to understand what your offerings are going to look like and knowing how you're scaling that. Then I think the last part, and this is one that I think is super important, is understanding what is the focus for that client's ongoing needs. Meaning, when you're looking at their content, what do they need? You can't look at what they want today. You have to understand, what is it that they need? What is it that they need to be doing? What do they need to be saying? You need to also understand, when are they going to maybe regurgitate something that they've said 3 months ago or 6 months ago? One thing that we know in social media world is as you're gaining followers, as you're gaining traction, you got to reintroduce yourself. And sometimes that reintroduction is not so much of recreating, but it may just be a simple, hey, we need to do another introduction video. Why? Maybe the client has lost weight. Maybe the client has changed their hairstyle. Maybe the client has created new offerings within their business. So you want to make sure that you're always relaunching, rebranding that client to make sure that they're staying at the top of their game and not falling behind with just the trends of what's taking place within the market. And so I say all of this, that when you're thinking about your business, when you're thinking about going into retainer work, you have to always look at these 3 areas. 1, does it fit? Is this a good fit for you? 2, making sure that you're focusing at having monthly plans synchronized with them. And then 3, also making sure that you're able to focus on the ongoing content. If you can do all those things, then we can start talking through the levels of how we build out a schedule with a client, how we build out a price, because pricing is not the same as what you price for a branding shoot. This pricing is different. And so you want to make sure, one, first and foremost though, that your heart is right. Meaning, are you going in this for the money, or are you going in this as a business partner? Are you going in there to truly help build and maybe expand what this client is doing? Or are you saying, hey, I see an opportunity to where I can make X amount of dollars on one client every month? I'll be honest, when I look at the retainer work that I do, and I have a max, I only take 5 clients a year. I do not do more than 5. If I lose one, then of course I have space to add one. But if I take on more than 5, then that means I have now stretched myself too thin to be a good business partner for those clients. And so I highly encourage, as you're thinking about retaining work, as you're thinking about working in the retainer space, because I believe that every photographer and videographer should have some form of consistency in what they're shooting every month. You want to always make sure that you yourself have fully established, 1, are you a good business partner outside of what you do and not just a shooter? 2, are you able to truly be someone that has a monthly rhythm? If you're not a person that is based on has monthly rhythms, this may not be a good fit. And then the 3rd area is going to always be making sure at the end of the day, this client is you're focusing on the client's needs, not just the wants, and truly helping them grow their business. Hey, I hope this helped. Once again, when you think about this channel, our goal is to show you how to build your business in the corporate space, as well as also building in the branding marketing space of photography and videography. Love y'all. Peace.
Here to show up and show out. Here to show up and show out. Here to show up and show out. Here to show up and show out.